This is raised fishbone stitch. So traditionally you'll see fishbone stitch done for leaves, and I thought, well, let's try something different. So we're doing a flower, but we're going to do a raised fishbone just to make it a little more interesting. It's pretty much the same as a fishbone, except we are going to go all the way to the edges with our stitches. Both edges. Now for the first stitch, I'm not sure it really matters. I guess we will go all the way down since we get to do it at least 3 times. Sorry for the cat hair. And we're gonna start our stitches back and forth. If I can figure out what, there we go. So with a regular fishbone, you would just make this stitch long enough to cross over. So maybe you'd come down here. For this example though, since we're doing a raised fishbone, instead of coming down here, we're going to go all the way to the other edge of our guideline. So I'm going to come down all the way over here. And basically what that's going to do is create this padding. So our finished leaf or petal in this case is going to be like fatter at the bottom, like have more dimension. Sorry, I'm catching I should have done my anchoring a little bit better. Okay, so again, now I'm going to come on this side, and instead of just going down here, I'm going to go all the way to the edge of that guideline. And then working on this side. On the left, down on the right, up on the right, down on the left, and continue. I think this flower shape is a little tricky. It's important to stick to your guidelines because it can look real wonky if you don't. You can see my where my stitches are crossing. It's not exactly straight down the center. And the reason that's happening for me is because I am stitching at an angle. And so I'm not making my angles even because I'm doing it by eye, you know? So everything's a little tilted like me. Okay, so here you can see I'm getting close to those previous stitches, and you're just going to keep going. You just want to make sure you keep covering those. As you get closer to the bottom, a lot of the stitches are just going to be sharing the same hole. But you can see how much more dimension we have compared to a regular fishbone. There we go. So I'm just going to keep going. This one's a little tricky, right? Because then you're upside down. I mean, nothing's changed. You're just swapping your brain. I find that doing it like this, I kind of start to overthink the angles. Like that, it was a pretty wide angle than what I'm used to doing with a fishbone. But because I'm going all the way across, like I overthink it, I think. I think I overthink it. So if you find yourself overthinking and not enjoying the stitch, you can always fake it. You can fake it by just doing some padding under a regular fishbone. So almost like you would for like a padded satin stitch. You could stitch the outline of the leaf or petal first and then do fishbone over it. Now that first one I definitely had more, my angle was definitely different. I do have a tutorial on fishbone stitch on the website, and I kind of go into a little bit more detail on the angles if you start overthinking or underthinking. Okay, I'm going to finish this one. I'll do the third one off to the left, and then I'll meet you back here to do the ones in the back petals. One thing before I do that and let you go is when I'm over here, I'm not pulling too hard. I'm just letting the stitch hang out there. Like, I don't want it flopping around or anything, but I'm not pulling super tight because it's just gonna squish down those original layers, and then you kind of lose the effect of doing the raised fishbone. So then, like, what was the point? Light touch. Okay, so to do the back petals, you may want to switch to fewer strands of floss if you want them to look even more further back. I'm just going to do them with a regular fishbone, A, because that way they won't be so puffy and they won't compete with these front petals, and B, because there's really no room for us to do the raised fishbone. So I guess one way you could do it is kind of flip your brain around and say, oh, now these are the back petals, and do these petals on top. That's a little tricky, right? Because you have to decide in your head where those guidelines are, because you're going to be stitching over. So that's just kind of that constant question of, like, what do I stitch first, the thing in the front or the thing in the back? Do I stitch the thing in the back complete and put the thing in the front over the top? But then I don't have my guidelines, but it might look better because it's actually going to be overlapped. Or do I do what I'm doing here, where I'm doing thing in the back after? And so when you do this way, utilize the tip of your needle. So get in here and tuck. Use an angle to hide the end of that stitch so it truly does go under the object it's supposed to be behind. But it's tricky because pretty soon here you can see, this stitch is covering the end of this stitch, okay? Which, I mean, from afar it looks totally fine. It looks totally fine. But here, let me show you the first time I did this and see I did better the time just now. I didn't really, you can see there's like a whole stitch missing right here. But I kind of lose the effect if you're not careful I mean, it still looks okay in here. But because I think the way that it will look the best is if you can make your edges as smooth as possible. Because when you get this jaggedness going, it just doesn't look as good when you stitch other things up to it. Does that make sense? Like over here, it looks better because you can't see any gap. But here, because I'm using this really light green right up to it, this just doesn't look great. It's not awful. But if I had lined my stitches up perfectly and didn't have any gap at all, it'd probably look even better. Did I do that here? I don't know. You can still see there's gap here. So again, I mean, it's back to, all right, so what, if that's not the solution, what is? Do I do this flower after I do this leaf and do it on top of the leaf and complete the whole leaf? But then again, we won't have the guideline to follow. So what is the point of me telling you this? Practice. Try both ways. What works best for you? Yeah. I'm going to redo that flower because this one that I'm doing right now looks way better. But you know what? That was like the second time trying this flower. So this is the third time. So, hopefully that tells you something. Keep practicing. And maybe try it this way, where we do the back petals second. And then practice it again, doing it the other way, where those first set of petals we do turn into the back petals. But either way, you now know how to do raised fishbone stitch. So have fun.